Hey everybody, I hope that you had a great spring break. Back at Face on the Milk Carton with chapter 13 today. It's pretty long, it's 16 pages, and I definitely want to refresh because I haven't read in over a week. So in chapter 12, Janny and Reeve were driving back from New Jersey and they pull into the driveway in Connecticut. Both their parents are waiting outside for them because they are late, very late, and they didn't go to school that day. Remember, they cut. All right, so here we are, chapter 13. It was wonderful to be yelled at. It was so parental. Her mother's face taut with worry and rage with a mother's face. Her father's hands rigid with wanting to shake her by the shoulders till her teeth rattled were her parents' hands. They loved her. Parents who loved you bothered to get mad. Once, years ago, furious at Sarah Charlotte, Janny had stomped on Sarah Charlotte's glasses and purposely broken her friend's retainer. When her parents saw the pink plastic splinters on the sidewalk, Janny thought they would kill her. And that time she cheated on a math test in 6th grade. That occasion was memorable for the screaming, and the second for the failure her parents had insisted she get for the entire marking period, even though the teacher was willing to forgive her. And of course, the time she and Sarah Charlotte, age 10, decided to see whether it was true what they heard at a slumber party, that you died when you had Coke and aspirin at the same time. Don't try that at home. The time her mother said Janny was old enough now to do her own laundry and ironing, and Janny replied, "Forget it, you do it or I'll stay dirty." Ah, the yelling. There my mother and father, thought Janny. That's why they're so mad. That's what mothers and fathers do. Janny, how could you do this no matter how upset or angry or confused you are? You know what a telephone is. My nose is itchy. It's allergies. They yelled and she basked in it. It was like sunshine in summer seeping into her pores. You could at least show some remorse, shouted her father, instead of smiling about it at the driveway. While next to him, Mr. Shields bellowed, "Reeve, how could you have done this? Did you know about this Hannah nightmare? And yet you purposely, the very next day, wished Janny off so her mother and father had to go through it again? It was horrible of you. What kind of person are you?" Those people in New Jersey are just people in New Jersey, thought Janny. I don't want them and I don't care about them. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Daddy. We decided to cut school so we could talk. We just drove around for hours. Nothing happened. Nothing happened, repeated her father. He had aged. Tonight he was indeed a grandfather. Lines creased his cheeks as if he had slept on a pile of books. The distinguished hair was just a tired gray. We paced the floor for hours in complete panic, wondering if you'd ever come back, wondering if you'd bother to let us know. And you dare to tell me nothing happened? Reeve simply stood still, waiting it out. Boys did that. Janny's mother, exhausted from worry and relief, burst into tears. "Janny, why didn't you tell us at breakfast you were that upset? Why did you lie and insist everything was fine? We would have done anything. Hannah ran away like that. I thought you were..." "We weren't running away," interrupted Reeve. "We were talking, that's all. I know we should have called and said we were fine, but we didn't, and I'm sorry and everything's fine." "You have a very strange concept of the word fine," said Reeve's father. "Let me assure you, you are not fine right now. You're about to get the punishment of your life. Get in that house." Reeve and Janny looked at each other, and they won't let us see each other again, thought Janny. I won't be able to ride to school with him. His father will ground him for the rest of senior year. "But Reeve, help me," said Janny desperately. "I needed him, and he was there." The yelling stopped. Their parents stood quiet and limp, and nobody had touched, nobody had reached out to forgive or hold. Reeve's mother surprised them all. "Then I'm proud of you, Reeve," she said huskily. "Frank and Miranda told us about Hannah and the colt. It must have been a shock to you, Janny." "It certainly was a shock to us. And now that you're back and we know you're safe, I suppose I can admit that helping Janny work this out was much more important than a day in school." Reeve changed gears as fast as a race car. "We could talk about it again tomorrow, Janny and I," he suggested brightly. "It's probably enough shock to skip the school all week." "I think not," said Reeve's father. Inside the Shields' house, the phone began ringing. "It's Megan," said Mrs. Shields, "or Lizzie or Todd. I called to see if you'd run away to one of them." Reeve stared at his mother. "Megan's in California," he said, and the adults nodded. "So is Hannah, presumably," said Janny's father, looking old enough for canes and nursing homes. "Oh, Daddy," cried Janny, hurling herself onto him as if she were 3 years old instead of nearly 16. "But I'm not nearly 16. Jenny Spring on the carton has a different birthday altogether. She's 6 months younger than I am." "I'm not going to join some creepy cult. I'm running away, Dad." "I'm not running away, Daddy. I'm sorry." And Janny linked arms with her elderly father and her trembling mother. Her parents made a sandwich around her, and they were both taller, and she was tucked between them like a child. "We don't know where Hannah is. We don't even know if she's alive," said her mother, weeping afresh. Colts went out of fashion. I haven't seen any Hare Krishna in years." Hannah could be wasting away on some forgotten commune in California, or she could be a bag lady in Los Angeles. Who knows? Look at Larry. What's he doing? Who knows? Her mother rocked. Ooh, here comes the wind. Her mother rocked Janny back and forth, but she was probably really rocking herself, or baby Hannah. Last night, you promised last night we wouldn't have to go through this again, said her mother, and 12 hours later it began. Her mother's voice changed to begging. Don't hurt me, Janny. Please, Janny, said her mother, raw and bleeding. Mr. and Mrs. Shields and Reeve went in to tell Megan, Lizzie, and Todd that the lost had been found. Janny helped her parents inside, consoled them, made promises. She knew she would never talk about New Jersey to them. They could not endure it. New Jersey. What a nice catch-all phrase for the mess that had erupted in her life. It rounded up the chaos into a neat rectangle below New York, leaning against Pennsylvania and waving out at the Atlantic Ocean. I'm sorry, she said again. She began crying harder than her mother. And her mother, being motherly, recovered somewhat. Don't cry, honey. It'll be all right. I love you and Daddy loves you. Her father stared at the wall, his jaw clenched to prevent the weeping. His eyes were saddest. Laden with grief, he chose not to shed. And whether he was thinking of Janny next to him or Hannah, gone forever, she did not know. Think of me, Janny thought. I'm your daughter. The nightmare came like mud, thick, oozing filth. The mud hung on her feet and her brain. It filled with reaching hands and cackling laughter. Car wheels spun in the mud and fingers pointing. Janny ran, but her feet did not move. Trucks tried to run her over, and when she screamed for help, her parents were busy with other things. That was a dream. She woke up. The bed was drenched with her sweat. What time is it, thought Janny, groping for the clock. If only it could be dawn so she could go downstairs and start coffee and be done with this horrible night. But it was 2 a.m. She wept briefly. Her mother had said, "We love you, it'll be all right." But did love conquer all? Could love conquer the theft of a child? It will never be all right, she thought. She did not turn on the lights. The room was entirely dark except for the faint blue glow from the digital clock. Yet she knew every object in the room. Everything around her was normal. She did not feel kidnapped. She felt chosen, adopted, needed so desperately by Frank and Miranda that perhaps they didn't even know what they'd done to acquire a second daughter. Temporary insanity. But if it came out, thought Janny, it would be permanent insanity for all of us. New Jersey must vanish. Jenny Spring must never be. She resolved to be Janny Johnson with all of her heart, her mind, and soul. She fell asleep, feeling better, but the dreams came again, and this time they were of falling. Bottomless falls, evil below, evil above, and when she woke up, she was hanging onto the pillow with a grip so tight she had ripped the lace trim off the pillowcase. She went silently into the guest room and retrieved more pillows, which she arranged around her bed like walls. Huddled in a white percale fortress, she managed to sleep a couple of hours. In the morning, breakfast was desperate and silent. Her mother drove her to school as if Janny might escape otherwise. "Mom," said Janny, "I promise, okay?" Her mother nodded shakily. "I'm staying home," she said. "I've canceled everything. If you need me, if you feel upset, if you think even for a minute about running away again. Janny, promise you'll telephone me." It was cold, like the beginning of winter, and the car heater had not begun to warm the car, but her mother was perspiring, sweating. She looked as exhausted as if she had just mowed several acres of lawn with a push mower. She looked old. "I promise," said Janny, "but I'm not going anywhere except class. Today's your hospital day. Go to the hospital. It's my tutoring day." "Then tutor." "I don't want to tutor." They giggled. "We sound like 2-year-olds slugging it out," said Janny. Her mother took Janny's hand, turning it over, examining it, as if she might never see that hand again and needed to memorize the texture and shape. "Mom," said Janny, "I promise." Okay, have a good day." Janny bolted before either of them broke down. "Earth to Jane Elizabeth Johnson," or "Earth to Jane Elizabeth Johnson," trilled Sarah Charlotte. She was elegant today. Long knit skirt, heavy blouse with a wide dramatic belt, and long coppery earrings that reached her narrow shoulders. Janny felt at least 5 years younger than Sarah Charlotte. "I'm right here," she said. "Stop making a spectacle of yourself." "I beg your pardon," said Sarah Charlotte frostily. "You're the one acting crazy." "What do you mean by that?" Janny tried to occupy herself unfolding a paper napkin for lunch. "I mean, you're out in space today. What's going on in your life that you aren't telling me about? I resent this, Janny, and I mean it. What aren't you sharing with me? There's nothing in your life that you're allowed to keep private." Sarah Charlotte took Janny's napkin away. Johnny said nothing. In a more irritable, more honest voice, Sarah Charlotte added, "Your mother and father telephoned 4 times yesterday looking for you. Now where were you and what's going on? I can't stand that you didn't tell me." "She's in love," guessed Katrina. Automatically, Johnny's eyes flew across the cafeteria to locate Reeve. Every other kid peered or stood to see what she was looking at. "It's Reeve," said Jason. "I knew it, the old boy next door trip." Reeve waved at her. "You toad," said Sarah Charlotte. "You've been doing stuff with Reeve and you didn't call me up and tell me. Our friendship's over, Janny." A strange flighty move was keeping Janny aloft. "That's okay," teased Janny. "I have a replacement over there in the senior section." She felt truly strung out, as if she were a rubber band being stretched and vibrating with pressure. "Blow him a kiss, Janny," said Adair. "Let's get this romance on the road." Janny blew Reeve a kiss. Reeve blew one back. "Okay, I'm begging," said Sarah Charlotte. "We're still best friends, and I want details. All of them." Jason, Pete, Katrina, Adair, and Sarah Charlotte swiveled their heads in unison and leaned forward into Janny's face. "You may have overcooked mushy canned peas if you tell," offered Jason. "You can have the bottom half of my biscuit, too," said Adair. "It's hardly burnt at all. It's supposed to be black like that." Taking her thick auburn hair with both hands, Janny stacked it in a huge mop on top of her head. "Kind of like that." She waved her hair at them and said prettily, "No," and then giggled. Sarah Charlotte discussed her belt instead, and where she had found it, and how many shops she had been to before finding the perfect one, and how much the earrings had cost. After lunch, a sick heaviness settled where the silliness had been. Janny's head began pounding. When she tried to swallow, nothing happened. Her throat thickened and went dry. Speaking of, I need a drink. Did you see that lightning? We gotta hurry up. Sorry. 5th period history, the teacher passed out a list of permitted choices for the winter term project. Sarah Charlotte said in a high-pitched British masterpiece theater voice, "Shall I look into changing world options of the dropping of atom bombs on Japan, my dear, or should I examine the personalities of Soviet leaders from Stalin to Gorbachev? I feel slightly faint from the excitement of it all." The teacher ignored Sarah Charlotte and sent them all to the library. "You're to do preliminary research." Sorry, my nose is itchy, guys. Sorry. "Read articles on subjects that interest you so that you may make an informed decision about the topic you'll be investigating for many weeks." The class charged to the library. "From the pace we're setting," observed Sarah Charlotte, "you would think we actually wanted to do this." The librarian, Mr. Yampolsky, was everyone's best buddy. He never gave attention to boys who stood on the library tables using newspapers for wings while they played Superman. He never yelled at people who had forgotten how to use the card catalog. That used to be in a library. Look it up on Google. He never suggested you should pursue the Wall Street Journal when all you wanted to do was look at movie stars and teen magazines. "Hey, Janny, babe," he said. "How's Mom?" "She's great. Probably can't wait till next summer so she can help you with inventory again." How plausible I sound, thought Janny. Perhaps I'll get used to lying and it will turn real. The way my parents' lies have turned real for them. Ooh, Janny. "Listen, inventory's the light of my life since your mother started doing it with me. So what's that term paper, kid? Lay it on me. Let's get your reference books out here." So this took place before the internet, where they had to use, books to find information. Mr. Yampolsky was always twice as excited about your project as you were, and if you were fascinated by cowboys, he'd be sure to locate a book about cowboys in Argentina or a National Geographic article about cowboys in Ukraine, and then he'd want to sit with you and exclaim over the pictures, and there was nothing Mr. Yampolsky enjoyed more than sharing his knowledge. "We're here to look at the prom issue of 17, said Sarah Charlotte. Even Mr. Yampolsky might have argued with that, but too many classes were pouring into the library for him to fight her. "Why the prom issue?" said Janny. "It's only November." "Because you're bound to be going to the senior prom with Reeve," said Sarah Charlotte. "He hasn't asked me." "Of course he hasn't asked you. Boys never think farther ahead than the next meal. But you have to plan, Janny, especially with that red hair. Can't just wear any gown. Now what do you think of this white gown?" "Too wedding-y," said Adair. "Turn the page immediately." "I hate sharing anything," said Sarah Charlotte, "especially magazines. When you hold it, I can't see, Adair. Let's get all the prom issues going back as many years as the library has. And then I won't be subject to all this sharing, Mr. Yampolsky," she yelled. That didn't sound right, but you know what I meant. "Sarah Charlotte," he yelled back. "Do we have back issues of 17, she yelled. "Why does anybody ever want..." My back issues of the New York Times, he yelled. Because nobody cares about garbage strikes in New Jersey, said Sarah Charlotte triumphantly. 17 laid open to a particularly repulsive dress with layers of tacky lime green ruffles and ribbon trim. The words New Jersey paralyzed Janny momentarily. She felt that the whole room had turned around and was pointing at her, silent mouth shutting. You. The way they would for fouls at a basketball game. The New York Times covers New Jersey, Janny said. Her heart was pounding so hard she could actually see the vibrations on her blouse. Thought it was for New York City. You're so ignorant, Janny observed Adair. And no, you cannot appear in public in a neon green dress. Turn the page. The New York Times covers the world, my dear, said Mr. Yampolsky, with special emphasis on news events in the greater metropolitan area of New York. A thin, wispy shudder ran through Janny, like a little snake tunneling. Kidnappings are news events, she thought. How many years do we have? 20, microfilmed. Want some? I'm offering a especially good price today. We'd rather have a good price on the prom dress, said Sarah Charlotte. Soviet leaders were bound to have been doing something 12 years ago. Janny walked up to her history teacher and asked to do Stalin through Gorbachev. He was thrilled, as if this request meant that teaching was worthwhile after all. Lost my spot. Hold on. Janny felt guilty. She would have to do an extra good job on the term paper now. He would suspect something. But there was no way she would look up New Jersey here at school, where Mr. Yampolsky would read over her shoulder, soaking up knowledge along with her. When the final bell rang, she left the building immediately, climbing on a different bus from the one that went to her street. People spoke to Janny, demanding to know why she was trespassing on their bus, but she did not hear them. She got off at the town library and went inside. The librarian there showed her how to use the many-volumed index of the Times, showing her how to find the spool of film in its little file drawer, how to thread it in the viewing machine, and how to print out a page if she wanted to copy instead of taking notes. You can look that up on Google, too, to see how it works. Thank you, said Janny, waiting for the librarian to leave her alone. She had read somewhere that when doctors told their patients they had cancer and were dying, the patients invariably ended the conversation by saying, thank you. She felt the cancer of madness inside her brain, the demon of her daydreams, its little fingernails scraping. She turned to the index for 12 years ago. Looking over her shoulder to be sure nobody was watching her, she looked up, spring, Jenny. It was listed. It was real. It had more than one entry. Day after day, they had followed the case on the stolen 3-year-old. She walked toward the microfilm drawers as if she were buying dirty magazines. Opening the shallow drawer, she read labels on white boxes until she found the right date, and then took her spool of film. Over by the window, a potted tree had grown huge and softly. Nobody had expected it to flourish in the dry library, but now nobody wanted to cut it back. Leaves hung in the science fiction books, and one branch curled over the microfilm viewer. Janny ducked beneath the bright green leaves and sat on the metal stool. She wound the film on the machine, turned on the lights, and watched the New York Times appear on the screen. She had thought they would save only one important article, like what the president was doing, but no, everything was there, from classified ads to fashion photos. She spun the knob, leaping past one day and into the other, and it was difficult to focus, confusing to operate. Almost. What if Sarah Charlotte or Adair comes up behind me and wants to know what I'm doing, she thought. She was out of breath. Her brain had ballooned into a misshapen thing filled with demons, while her lungs had contracted like flat tires and she was suffocating in the library stacks. And then, quite suddenly, her own picture stared back at her, the same one that had been on the milk carton. No ransom had been asked for little Jenny Spring. Read the caption. Hope that the 3-year-old wandered away and would be found has diminished as National Guard units give up the search. She read about the shopping mall, the lack of clues, the search. She read quotes from neighbors and police, and at the bottom of the column in different typeface it said, continued on page 34. Janny scrolled around to page 34. A 3-column photograph appeared on the screen. It was a family portrait. Parents, grandparents, and children lined up, babies on laps, smiles on faces. She closed her eyes. It's them. If I look at them, they'll exist. If I read page 34, I'll know their names. They must be real. Mother and Daddy are real. I don't want New Jersey to be real. She kept her eyes closed and fumbled for the light switch, and when she turned off the machine, the page had vanished. She rolled the film back up and put it in the box. She had to hold on to the edge of the tables to find sufficient strength to stand up. Reeve was beside her. She stared at him, still struggling for breath. I followed you, he said, in my Jeep. I wanted to give you a ride home. I wanted you to ride with me every day, always. And you got on the bus. Jenny was so aware of his maleness. They had shared nothing except a kiss in the leaves and another on the sidewalk. Are you in trouble with your parents? Reeve rolled his eyes. My father wanted to know where I got the money for the trip. See, they think the first step in preventing drug abuse is preventing access to money. And they knew I didn't have much. So like a jerk, I said I charged it all on the American Express. My father took the motel receipt out of my pocket. Oh, yikes, said Jenny. You don't think they'll tell my parents, do you? They promised not to. They said your mother and father have enough to worry about already. Did you tell them we didn't actually do anything? Yes. Did they believe you? What do you think, said Reeve. Would you believe your 17-year-old son if he... Body came between them, thick, middle-aged female. The librarian here was not as understanding about flirtation in the stacks as Mr. Yampolsky. In a dry, sarcastic voice, she said, are we doing a term paper? And if so, may I inquire as to the subject? Colts, said Reeve without missing a beat. Hold on. One more, I think. Yeah. The Hare Krishna. How they went from being an idealistic organization of peaceable hippies to a major league crime like drugs and kidnapping. He had said kidnap out loud, and Jenny felt truly endangered as if somebody would notice, call the police or the FBI, or arrest her mother. Oh no, Reeve, she gasped. Quick, give me the dime. I have to call my mother. I'm not home. She'll be worried. I have to tell her I'm here. Jenny could hardly punch the payphone buttons to put the call through. What if her mother had already panicked, had already gone to school, found Jenny, had not taken her own bus? Hello, said her mother. Mommy. Jenny was sick with relief. Lunch threatened to return. Don't worry, I'm at the library. I'm looking up a term paper. I meant to call you before I came. Sarah Charlotte says I've been in outer space all day. Were you worried? Are you all right? I'm fine, said her mother. Is that true? No, it's a lie. I'm a wreck, and your father's at a soccer game, so I couldn't call him to say you were missing again. Mommy, I haven't been to a game of his yet. Reeve's here. He'll drive me. I'll meet you at the soccer field, okay? That's the end of chapter 13. So we found out that Jenny truly was kidnapped. She found, the articles and pictures of her family, and that's where we're leaving it. So have a good night. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.